The numbers that you're throwing at me are just blowing my absolute mind. Like, like a truck of H3 could power the United States for how long did you say? Why
A
on earth?
year.
What is H3? What a
Helium
year?
3,
What is
He3.
H3?
It's
Yeah,
an
what is?
isotope of helium. It's so it has normally helium has two protons and two neutrons. He3 has two protons and one neutron, and
Okay.
at fairly reasonable energy levels, we can fuse these two helium isotopes into something else, and that releases a tremendous amount of energy. Uh, the problem is that on Earth right now we only have about 25 kilograms of helium 3 because we get all of our helium bubbling up from inside the Earth. We find weird gas pockets, and then we can take the helium out of that and make party balloons and watch it float into space and never come back. But the moon is full of helium 3. Uh, the sun produces it as a result of the nuclear reactions within the sun, and they just are flowing out from the sun 24 hours a day for the last 4.5 billion years. And it's raining down on the moon and raining down on Earth. But the problem is that the helium 3 hits the Earth's atmosphere and bounces off and disappears. When it hits the moon, there's no atmosphere and it just kind of statically bonds to the dust in the moon. So for the last 4.5 billion years, the moon dust is just full of the statically bonded helium 3 that has nowhere to go. And in the 1960s and 70s, when we landed on the moon, we discovered just how much there was and realized what it could be used for. And some of the first big projects NASA did was basically calculate the ore load of the moon and helium 3 and realize that there's millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of tons of this stuff. So the missions that
Mm.
China is doing to the moon, that the India Japan consortium, Jeff Bezos in the U.S., all those lunar missions are meant to establish eventually mining operations on the moon, because whoever controls the moon will control global power basically for the next 10,000 years.
Right, you've made me a lot more terrified about our need to get to the moon now before the
Yeah,
Chinese.
we
That's
we
quite
should have never built the
terrifying.
International Space Station and just gone to the moon to mine stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it feels like a video game. First we got to get the space station, then we got to get
Yep.
the next step and the next
Yeah.
step. I mean, I'm looking forward to. I'm talking to Eric Berger, who wrote the book, a book about SpaceX. I'm speaking to him next week, so that's going to be a really fun interview. I guess we'll get to talk a lot about this sort of stuff. But so I know America has their like Space Force thing
Yeah.
that they've created for this very reason. I didn't realize just how pressing the need to have that was. I feel, you know, the memes were still
Yeah.
amazing with Trump and his like
Well,
Space Force
the
thing,
the
but
the
yeah,
Space Force, like, part of the 67 treaty is that no one's allowed to militarize space. Um, that doesn't mean they haven't. I have no doubt that superpowers have weapons in space that are secret and they're not telling anyone about. But the what mostly these satellites in space are they're called dual use. So it might be a satellite that's taking pictures of stuff, it's a spy satellite, whatever, but also has like a pair of, I don't know, pincher claws on it. So if a Chinese satellite gets too close, you can go by and just chop the solar panels off of it, or maybe a can of spray paint, and it can spray paint over the solar panels so that these satellites just die. These dual use satellites, they can also be masked as repair satellites or refueling satellites. And just imagine them like an auto mechanic. An auto mechanic can fix your car or destroy it in ways you could never imagine, right? So there's probably a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
these dual use satellites up there floating around that are technically not military satellites, but they can easily be militarized. Uh, and the idea behind the Space Force is that it takes the space operations of the Air Force and puts it into its own distinct branch of the military, so that there's just these guys dealing with things in space, and the Air Force can focus on jets and, I don't know, helicopters or whatever the Air Force does. Uh, and
Yeah, yeah. Tracking
it
UFOs.
is a joke meme because it just seems like we're not used to actually sci-fi being real. Like, when we start
Yeah,
mining space, it's gonna still seems totally surreal to us that, like, we're getting rocks from space and it's making people trillionaires, and they have more power than we could ever imagine, and all of a sudden, the plot to The Expanse is real. And uh, we we will need these military forces to deal with this stuff. The problem is that right now the treaties don't necessarily allow it to happen. And enforcement is impossible. In my master's thesis, I joked about a fictitious Elon Musk type character who, uh, let's say, he's got a contract with NASA for Falcon 9 rockets or something similar, and
Hmm.
the rockets keep blowing up, and there's a problem, and they lose their contract. Well, this billionaire might get really pissed and say, you know what, screw you. I'm moving all my operations to Libya. Libya never signed the Outer Space Treaty. I can do whatever I want. I can land on the moon and claim the moon for me. What are you going to do about it? It's going to cost you $1 trillion to figure out how to get me off the moon. And you don't have that money and time. And by then, I will have flooded the world with helium-3, and I'll be richer than all the nations put together. And, you know, without having a coherent space policy for all nations on Earth, uh, we can run into all sorts of loopholes and shenanigans and problems that, I can't even conceive of what all of the issues will be.
Yeah, yeah. So, how would you propose? You mentioned you're going to the UN. How would you propose that we try and deal with or what sort of framework would you say we need to put in place in terms of how we allocate resources coming out of space? Because as you've mentioned, things would I think what you say quintillions of dollars worth of stuff
Yeah.
is in space. And the other question I had was, will that mean that resource will just become so abundant that the price will go to almost zero because there's so much of it available? Like,
Yeah,
will that
kind of.
help sort of weigh out the sort of the stupid amount of wealth that someone might accumulate? Like, say, because obviously our prices on Earth are based on how much it costs to harvest or mine whatever resource or gas that we're talking about. And as soon as it's like infinitely abundant, that should hopefully push the price down, maybe.
Uh, I foresee there's probably going to be a cartel of some kind. Kind of like De Beers and the diamonds.
Hmm.
Diamonds are not rare. I can go to Colorado and in a day have several carats of diamonds, just suck them out of the ground for pennies. Um,
Hmm.
but what the cartel does is they reduce supply. So if I go to Colorado and I make a really big mining claim, all of a sudden I have weird Dutch secret agents trying to assassinate me and destroy equipment because they want to maintain, the relative scarcity of their resource. And in the asteroid belt, there's enough iron in the asteroid belt that at today's prices can make every human being on Earth worth $100 billion. That's how much iron there is just in the asteroid belt. And
What if I want it in Dogecoin?
Yeah, exactly. I want all the Dogecoin in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the historical examples we have are the claim system, the mining claim system. When gold was discovered at Sutter Mill in California in 1848, right at the end of the Mexican American War, it resulted in this rush of 300,000 people moving across the continental United States into the wilds to get as much gold as they can. The United States had no presence in California until like 1851. So about 2.5 years of lawlessness. There were mining camps in California where the murder rate was higher than any death rate of any battlefield of World War II. We're talking like 1 in 60 people will get murdered in
What?
a year. Yeah, because there was no law. There was no
Right.
police. There were no lawyers. There were no courts. There were like, I think, less than 1,200 Navy sailors stationed in San Francisco hanging out, and they weren't the law. They were just probably getting drunk and going to brothels. Um, and so it took until 1851 till the first marshal was in California. But what the communities there did was they adopted the Spanish system for mining claims, and it was kind of uh, uh, I don't know. It might have military, it might have posses, but for mostly it was on the honor system. I stake this section of a river. It's mine as long as I mine it. If someone jumps this claim, I'm entitled to kill them, and that was kind of how it worked. Oftentimes, people will get
Hmm.
killed and then their claim will get jumped. But that system proceeds to today in many nations around the world, U.S., Canada, uh, uh, I'm not sure who else in Mexico, but this this claim system will have to probably be applied to space, and it'll probably have to be something where you can't stake a claim until you're on it, and when if you're on it, you have to be working it, so that to keep some company from saying, "Oh, I own these 5,000 asteroids, I got claims on all of them." Well, if you aren't mining those 5,000 asteroids, no, you don't have claims on them, uh, and that will
Okay.
help probably keep lawlessness to a minimum, and probably help maintain a competitive market for these minerals. But at the same time, who's going to have the resources to mount these expeditions? It's going to be Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and large governments like China, Japan, India, Israel's trying to get in there, the European Space Agency. Uh, so it's not going to, like, I'm not going to be able to make a claim on an asteroid worth trillions of dollars and then mount my own expedition to it. I don't have the money for that unless GameStop really moons, and then maybe I can. Uh,
Maybe
but
we should do that. We should all pool our money together
yeah, make a
to.
space company. I'm for it. If any other GameStop people out there want to make a space company with me after this moons, let's do it. Take them all on.
Yeah, I'm in. It should be great. So, do you? Yeah, there's so many questions I have about this. Just it's so crazy to even like actually be talking about it seriously. Do you know what I
It's going to
mean?
get
It's
weird the
so
next 20 years for sure.
yeah. I mean, like hopefully we do it right. Like, what are your like estimations on how humanity is going to handle this?
Poorly.
I was afraid of that. Like,
Yeah. You know, we tried to make a new moon treaty in the 70s, and only 5 nations signed on to it, and none of them were countries capable of going to the moon. Uh, so you know, I it's the human condition to not do anything until the shit hits the fan. We just, the stock market's the same way. We ignore everything until there's like an insurmountable problem. Then we go, oh no, and then we make rules. Um, we're just not very proactive. We're not going to do anything about climate change until it's destroying our entire planet, and we're not going to do anything about a new space treaty until 1 million space settlers are wiped out with a space laser by some space pirate. Like we're just not we're not proactive in that way. So I don't see us.
hmm.
I'm fully capable of being the Cassandra and being like, oh no, there's warnings, don't do that, and then no one listens to me until it's too late. I felt I was kind of that way last year with the coronavirus. Back in January, I was writing articles showing the statistics of what was going to happen with the coronavirus. People kept telling me I was a fear monger, and then like 2 months later, the entire globe shut down. And I was like, I did the math, I showed it to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Why would people
yeah.
listen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I often wonder about that on many different topics. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.